Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. So you want to live off the grid? You thinking about doing it? Well, let me tell you the pitfalls, the ups and downs, because we just made it to the 1-year mark. Hoku and I, and let me tell you, it's been an adventure. And we have been living off the grid for a year now. And let me tell you, it's been an adventure. And you know, with me traveling all the time and heading out to go camping and my overlanding adventures, this actually coming back to a home base seems to be, it works fine. And if you are looking to pursue living off the road or living full-time on the road, you know, I tried it for several months, but it's always great to come back to a base location, whether it's your house or a property, cabin or RV. So I think the biggest thing for myself and Hoku living off the grid is the adaptability to be flexible. And that's what SEMPER Gumbie means, always flexible. It's a military term that we've used for years. And you just got to take things how it comes. And living off the grid or in a homestead is, you know, you have to be flexible. Now, what is living off the grid? I mean, I know people say I live off the grid and they still have secondary power coming in. So technically, you know, being completely off the grid is something that many folks talk about doing it, but it does take a certain way of living and adapting to do so. Now let's talk about budget. The first thing for off-grid property or homestead is you're going to find some land or some property. And I remember when property was only about $3,000 an acre, you know, maybe 10 years ago. Now you're going to be spending somewhere about $9,000 to $11,000 or a little bit more, depending on where you at, per acre. Now my property, I spent, it came out to about $9,500 an acre. So, which where I'm at is not bad at all, because there will be nothing that was going to be built on the backside of my property. The adjoining property out there is about 100 acres of private land. So I'm not worried about anybody building anything soon. So the main cost of it is going to be your property. The second part of that cost is the land, the clearing of the land. Are you going to have, how far are you going to clear back? How much livable space that you're going to build on? And this property had an abandoned house that was sitting for about 40 years. It had, I guess we found snake skin in there. There was a bunch of bees that, you know, built hives in there. And it was, like I said, totally abandoned for about 40 years. Right next to it, there was a tin outhouse, storage house, which was pretty big as well. So I had to pay someone to take the house down. What they did is, you know, they dug a big hole in this property, big hole, and they demolished the house and pushed it into the hole, and we burned it. You know, burned most of it, all the wood and everything. So, you know, that cost me about $5,000 to do that. And, you know, it had to be done. We had to get that house done. The next expense for me was clearing off the land. And, you know, this place was all trees. You couldn't get a vehicle in here. So I went in with some friends and we actually cut trees to build a driveway, or to get the heavy equipment that I was going to use to grade the land and clear it. Now, another huge cost that's going to be in your budget is grading and taking down trees. And like I said, I had so many trees out here, it was crazy. I was able to get someone to come in and grade the land, take down the trees, and help me clear out the area. And that will be your next set of cost for your property. Now, I've got about 300 feet, maybe 400 feet, 500 feet, I don't know, from the main road or the county road down to right up here. So now we've graded and pushed back a path all back there. I may be able to get Sarge back there, but it's pretty tight. I might have to take down a couple trees yet. So, but I'd like to put something way back in there as well. After the grading was done, we had to put down some crushed gravel, or I would say Kurt, or whatever they call it. It's that orange looking base, and that was about $700 a load of, you know, for a truck. And I had to bring in 2 trucks for those to completely come all the way back here. And without the gravel and all that base layer, it was just dirt. And when it rained, this place became a mud pit. I mean, there was mud everywhere. So that's something you need to consider, is how much driveway or pathway that you're going to take for that. Now, like I said, it was $700 or $800 for that first base layer. Had to do 2, and then I had to come in and put this down here, this gray crushed gravel as well. And once everything got packed in, we came in, and I believe I bought 2 loads of gravel, and it goes from here all the way to the driveway to the county road. And that was quite a bit. It was almost, I can't remember offhand, but I want to say about $900 or $1,000 per load at that time. Now everything has gone up, so that's another cost you would have to consider. Now comes the livable space. I mean, now you got to build or manufactured or have a something that you could live in, and I went with the manufactured cabin here. I did do a lot of work inside, but the initial cost to get the cabin here, this I believe this is a 12 by 36, and it was all unfinished. There was electrical ran in there, so the junction boxes, the outlets, and the breaker box was all in there, but I don't have grid power coming into this property. And so when I bought the cabin, 12 by 36, I had to start working on the inside, and it's still a work in progress. I mean, the thing with homesteading or off-grid living, you know, unless you have an unlimited amount of funds, you have to take things in stages, especially if you're building or fixing it up while you're living in it, because it does take, you know, sometimes when I build stuff in there, or when I did the walls with the cedar planks and the tin, I had to move everything to one side of the cabin, finish that side, move everything back. And if I had to do things over again, instead of starting at the bottom, I would have started at the top. Now I still have to finish the ceilings. I still have to put some insulation. I've tried using foam, and that thing works okay. They're closed cell fireproof foam, but it is so messy when you do it. And you know, you have to apply more than, you know, a certain amount. So like one can would do about 5 feet by, I would say, 6-ish. And you know, that's a lot of foam you got to have, and it just falls everywhere. So for me, since I started fixing the bottom half of the cabin, I got to cover everything up with plastic. So I might go ahead and do foam sheets now on the top, but I need to work on that before the super hot summer gets in. So then I went with wood planks. I did cedar planks. I went to a mill and I bought a whole truckload for, I think, about $300. Now there are all different sizes as far as width. That's why you see in the cabin everything's overlapped or lapped. And then instead of doing the whole wall, to help cut the cost or spread everything out, I went with some corrugated tin from, I think I bought it from Home Depot. I think they were $8 a sheet. I think they were 8 by 8 feet long, I think by 4 feet, 3 feet or something like that. So that cost me an additional $500 for everything inside. The thing with the metal tin is, you know, they're sharp. You got to watch it, use gloves. But we were able to finish the whole bottom half of the cabin with the help of some friends. We did one side and then I finished the rest. So that's another cost you have to factor in. Now the electrical system in the cabin, some of you may have seen my electrical video install. Fortunately, you know, me being sponsored by the battery company LiTime, I was able to have them send me a bunch of batteries, and we put in about, I think, over 15 kW in this cabin. I believe it's like 15.5 kW, but you know, I do have a solar inverter charger. I do have my batteries. They're all circuit breakers. Everything's piped into the breaker box and then to the outlets. You know, I've got 120 volts coming in, and I'll show you the solar panels here in just a second. But I'm completely off the grid. I bring my own water in. I have my own electricity. So, you know, what's the positive part or the con of this is, you know, I've sold my house a year and a half ago. So I've not had an electricity bill, a mortgage, or a water bill in a year and a half. Now, everybody said the initial cost that I put out to spend for this place was pretty high. But in the long run, it'll all factor out and pay for itself. And what I also learned about living off the grid is you don't need a whole lot of stuff. You know, everything is a minimal, or you become a minimalist. And, you know, because I don't have a whole lot of place to store things. And, you know, that was the hardest part of going from grid life to off-grid. But, you know, being an overlander and doing a lot of camping, it wasn't that hard of a transition to build this homestead or do off-grid living. Another thing I've learned is you don't throw away spare, I don't say spare parts, but say I cut some wood and I've got 3 feet or 2 feet left. You don't throw that away because you're going to end up using it somehow. So, you know, you make do of what you have. And, you know, I don't want to say frugal, but, you know, you got to have stuff to save money, because now that I'm fully retired, I haven't worked in about a year and a half. You know, my budget or my income now is not where I could take trips every weekend, or I can buy, you know, a whole bunch of stuff, you know, computers, electronics. That was a big, I think a big shock is when I really had to start budgeting for my income that I bring in. And, you know, the last 6 months is I really had to tighten down on my belt and only purchase things that I really need and not what I really wanted. Does that make sense? So, you know, that was another thing I had to accept, was the budget or how to live. You know, I'm not eating steak every night. I'm not eating filet mignon or seafood, you know. But I think for me, that was the big sticker shock, or the big shock of living off grid and not, you know, being fully retired. Now, so a lot of you probably say, what do you do on a daily basis? Well, I just sit on this porch and drink coffee all day. No, it depends on the season. I learned this winter was my first season living in an off-grid cabin. And let me tell you, it was definitely a huge learning curve, because this winter we had so much snow and ice and temperatures below zero. And me living off of in the county, our roads were not paved. It was, you know, actually taken care of by the state. So the city and the county would not come out to clear the roads. But I learned during winter, I did purchase a stove around Thanksgiving or around the Black Friday timeframe, a wood stove. And that really came in handy during the code, when the code snap came through. And, you know, we had over 6 or 7 inches of ice on top of it, 6 or 7 inches of snow. It got cold, it got hot, it got cold again. And, you know, so that was the huge factor for me this winter. I don't know how our ancestors or our forefathers or how them cowboys did it back then, you know, but they were definitely a tough group of individuals. So I had to buy firewood. As you can see, I've got a lot of firewood now, but it was the first time for me with the wood stove, learning how to use it. And I ended up buying wood that was on sale, that somebody was selling, but it wasn't seasoned. And I had creosote build up in the stove-pipes. I think during the winter, I had to take apart and clean my wood stove, all the stovepipes, all the way to the top of the stack, the bird screen. I think I did it twice, where you know, creosote is a buildup of crusty, I mean, it's from burning pine and, you know, the moisture, and it just builds up in there, and it restricts the airflow in the stovepipes. And I was getting a lot of backflow as far as smoke coming back into in the cabin. And there were some times where I had to open up the doors, put on some fans, and blow the smoke out. It was pretty bad. I also realized that I try to go cheap on the wood stove, and I wanted to save money with the stovepipe. So, you know, I try to go as minimum as possible, but initially my stovepipe wasn't over the roof line, and the pressure in the house was greater than the outside, so I wasn't getting good airflow out, a lot of backflow of smoke. And it was a learning experience. I finally ended up spending the additional money to extend my stovepipe. And of course, the stovepipe outside is triple wall stainless versus the inside, which is single wall aluminum. So the cost difference in there, I think the pipe alone I got out here is close to, with everything, about $1,000. Well, no, take that back. About $1,800, $2,000. So the exhaust and the pipes cost more than the stove. But it was my first wood stove, and I was learning about it. Now I know that, you know, if you're looking to build a wood stove, you know, I went through the sidewall of my cabin versus the ceiling. If I went through the ceiling or the rooftop, it would have been cheaper. But you know, I had to worry about, well, leaks, and I didn't want any of that. So I go out the sidewall and then up. So that's another cost I wasn't prepared for. And I was, you know, like I said, I was born and raised in Hawaii. We never had wood stoves. I've always lived in the States where we had fireplaces. So, you know, it was definitely a different type. Oh, and one thing with a wood stove, don't think you're going to get a good night's sleep with a wood stove, because my wood stove, I had to wake up every couple hours and restoke the fire or place more logs in there. I would get up because it was cold, and I would look at my temperature. It would drop 10, 15 degrees inside. I mean, it was still livable, but it was cold. So, you know, you have to keep feeding the fire. Now, there are systems out there like a pellet stove and other things like that that feeds in. But for this model and this type I had to wake up every 3 or 4 hours to feed the fire. And I didn't need an alarm clock because the code would wake me up. So that's another one. And then with the, like I said, the wood, I learned now that when you purchase wood, it has to be used for the next go around. You have to season it. So I've got it under the carport, this first initial batch, Now I've got a whole bunch of wood out here that looks ready to go, and I just got to have somebody come out there, and I've got to get a chainsaw and cut some wood for next winter. But that was a big learning curve for me as far as the wood stove. Another way I supplemented the heat with the wood stove was a diesel heater. And one of my sponsors of my channel sent me a diesel heater, and it was only a 8 kW. So it did okay to help supplement the stove, but to heat up a 18 or a 12 by 36 cabin with an 8 kW would probably had done well, but I didn't finish my ceilings and my floor, and my windows aren't the best to retain heat. So it supplement that, and it did help, you know, but it wasn't something where it was 75, 80 degrees, but that's where the wood stove came into play. But a cost of diesel was part of, you know, that the drawback is you had to go get diesel, you had to store diesel. Back then, I think this past winter, diesel was only $3 a gallon. I think now it's almost $5.50, $6 a gallon. But we're warmer now, so I don't need diesel. So that came in handy as well. And that's another cost, diesel, and then now gasoline. Let me tell you about gas, because the days were shorter in the winter, and I didn't have my solar panels yet. I purchased them, I think, right after the winter snow came. So I was using a 2,000 watt generator to recharge my lithium batteries. I wouldn't say daily, because I could go a couple days without recharging my batteries. Like I said, it's 15,500 watts of power. But the cost of the generators, unleaded gas, as well as, you know, the diesel. So, you know, I think during the winter, maybe it was about $10 of gas every 2 days that for my generator. It was only a 2,000 watt generator. Now, since then, I do have a 9,500 watt generator, which is dual fuel, propane and gas, which good friends of mine from Florida, Oh No Adventures, Clay and Sherry, brought me up a generator for me to use. So I do have 2 generators, but I have not used the big one yet. Now that one doesn't have an inverter on it, so, you know, I wouldn't plug in my laptop and my, you know, my sensitive electronics. You know, that would probably be for the fridge, be for some lighting, say my neighbors needed, but to charge up the batteries, I don't know if I would do that, because it doesn't have a built-in inverter. So that covers the property, the heating. Now let's talk about water. As you can see right here, we built a shower house I think last summer, which was fine, outdoor shower house with the roof on there when it's 75, 80 degrees. But this winter, there was no way I could shower in that thing. I mean, you could, you know, you would end up looking like a fireman, you know. I'm just kidding to all my firefighter buddies. You know, what I ended up doing is I ended up getting a membership at a Planet Fitness. So when I would travel, I could also shower, you know, take a hot shower as well. But now that the temperatures have started to warm up, I'm going to start using that a little bit more. I do have a shower system in there, which I've got to fit. I just put that in there. It's a tankless water heater that's going to be running off propane. So that's how I'm going to take my shower. But water plays a big part. You know, you need water regardless if you're on a property or camping or out there, you know, somewhere off the grid. Water is a big part. Now, I don't have water on this property except the 5-gallon, you know, those blue water jugs that you see at the offices that have the dispenser. I have about 6 of them, and 6 jugs would last me probably about a week for myself and Hoku. And now that I'll be able to take a shower here. I've got to build a system or get a tank that's larger, a little bit larger, where I could put more water, because when I start using that shower system, we're looking about 2 to 3 gallons a minute. You know, now I'm not going to do the full, you know, Hollywood shower. I'm going to be taking a military shower where you wet yourself down, soap up, and then rinse off pretty good. So that will help conserve water. So we're in process of that. I don't have a shower inside of the cabin. You know, I still have to figure out, like I said, you know, when you live in it and build, you know, it's a little bit difficult. And then for lighting here at the cabin and security, I have motion lights. I do have my DEVOS light rangers up there that provides lighting out here on the porch. And then of course I've got my big 4,000 watt DEVOS light there with a motion sensor, which I put out here at night. And if anything comes up or movement, it'll light up this whole area. It's pretty bright. I also have security lighting on the carport. So when somebody drives down the driveway or walks, it'll light up. I think that's about 2,000 lumens. And then of course I've got, if you see behind me up there, I do have the Let's We Safe motion radar detector. So if something comes down the driveway or movement out here, it'll give me an alarm in there letting me know something's outside. Now, the other night it did go off twice. And I went out here to look. It was a rabbit that was running around the driveway. But, you know, that radar detector can sense up to half a mile away, and it could go through non-metallic surfaces to pick up as well. So I've got security lighting there as well, because, you know, light is your #1 security source. And, you know, but that's how I light up this whole place. Eventually, I want to put a little bit more lighting out here. I plan to put some security cameras like deer cams, or I do have this camera system that was sent to me that did not require internet. It operated off cell towers or cell service, and I couldn't get it working. So I packaged it back up and I sent it back to the company and said, you know, I can't do a video on this. This thing has failed. So I guess, you know, I've got to figure another way. Now, like I said, outdoor cameras or, you know, would be perfect out here on the trees. And I guess lastly, power consumption. That plays a big part in off-grid living. I have a 12-volt fridge. And, you know, I went with 12 volt because 12 volt uses the less amount of wattage than a 120 or a 110 would use. So, for example, if I had a normal fridge, uses about 100 and something watts whenever the compressor is running. And a fridge only uses power when the compressor runs. Once it cools down, it'll shut the compressor off. But I use a 12 volt fridge and I'm drawing about 30 watts of it, maybe even 25. And so using a 12 volt fridge definitely saves me power consumption on my batteries. And my lighting system, my lamps, all my lights in there go into the outlets, which go off the lithium battery. Now I do use LED lights or LED bulbs. So, you know, I try to use the most energy conservative or energy consumption light bulbs in there. I do have 2 power stations from Blue Eddy. One is a 2700 watt power station, which I leave in Sarge most of the time to power my 12 volt fridge in there. But in the cabin, I do have a Blue Eddy AC 500, which is a 5,000 watt inverter. It has a 50 amp, 30 amp, and a couple 20 amp outlets. As far as USBs, all that good stuff. But I only have one battery, which is only I think 2,500 watt battery. So I use that as a backup or supplement. Now my television runs off my lithium batteries, my lighting, my stove, I use propane, and people are gonna say, why don't you just get a bigger propane tank out there? And, you know, like I said, you know, I will eventually. Right now, we're just in the first year. Everything you have to build in stages. So my propane is just the 1 pound bottles or the 20 pound tanks. For cooking, I use a camp stove. I do also have what they call a rock pot, which is a non-electric crock pot. You heat up the heating stone in the fire or on a propane pit or on a stove, whatever, any heating source, and then you place it in the rock pot. You place your pot over that. You put in all your ingredients, you know, like if I make beef stroganoff, you know, throw everything in there. Once you get there, close the lid and then secure it, and it'll cook for 9 hours, or it'll be hot for over 9 hours. So that's one way I could make, you know, cook. And then of course, right behind me, I have my pellet grill right there. That is a battery operated pellet grill. So I don't need no electricity for that. And, you know, I can also cook on that. And then of course I've got my gas grill, and, you know, I got my, you know, my Stoke voltaics, and I got my jet boil. So it's not a big deal as far as cooking. Maybe I'll get an induction stove, but I just got a air fryer recently, but that thing sucks about 400 watts of power when you turn it on. So, you know, of course I made some vegetables, you know, of course French fries, a little bit of snacks like chicken wings and stuff like that. But it draws about 400 watts of power, which is, I mean, a lot for a little air fryer. But you know, I've got these big battery systems, so no, I don't worry about it. Coffee, I use my jet boil on a daily basis, but I also have a battery operated coffee pot, which I've used a couple times, K-cups, but I don't use K-cups a whole lot. I like some regular ground or bean coffee that you grind up and pour it through the flow through. So that covers the food section. I mean, of course, my 12-volt fridge has a freezer as well in there. And like I said, another source is I got a 12-volt fridge, a TRAVOCA fridge in my Tacoma. So pretty much that's it in a nutshell as far as, you know, where I'm at this 1 year point. Now, my next big project is I have to mount these solar panels on a mounting system. As you can see, I've got 6 of them. They're almost 500 watts a piece, and I've got them wired up and they go inside, and I'll show you that here in just a second. But I've got to figure a way, man, they're dirty. I got to clean them today. But I got to figure a way to mount them on a stand. Now, if you guys, I know a lot of you in the off-grid community have solar panels, and I see a lot of I see some people mount them on the ground. I see some people mount them on the roof. These I don't want to mount on the roof just because I've got metal roof. You know, I could have put them on the carport, but I am going to build a system where I can mount these on the ground. And these are 44 inches across. So, you know, I've got 6 of them. So I got to figure, I would like to leave them out here. But once the trees, I think, start getting some leaves, I don't know what kind of sun that I'll have. So don't mind the mess. Like I said, I just put the solar panels up not too long ago, probably about 2 weeks or so. But as you can see, here's the positive, negative coming from the solar panels. And this right here is my circuit breaker, or my panel shut off. And you want to have, make sure you have a breaker or a shut off there between your inverter charger and your power, solar power panels. So this is my inverter. So let's look at it. So if you can see, well, I'll tell you what, let me show you how it works. So let's turn off my solar panels. Okay. All right, so I've got power coming in. What I do in the morning when it's sunny, I flip on the solar power panels, and you will see that right there is the panels, and it's coming into my inverter. And sorry about the light, but right here is my batteries. But right now I am operating mainly off of solar, and that green blinking light is meaning it's charging, and I've got 120 volts coming in, and from my solar panels I've got, I think, close to 200. I think I had the other day. The sun is just coming out, so it'll be about 220 or 200 volts from my solar panel right there. So sorry about the glare. And then of course, see my batteries. I do have 74%, and it's charging right now. You can see that blinking light, and this one's 68. So I think by the end of the day, these things will be charged up as well. So and Hoku's also adapting well, and she likes running around and just kind of laying out and relaxing most of the day here at the cabin. But hey, living off the grid's a great opportunity for you to reconnect with nature. Of course, you know, I do have my Starlink hooked up. I do have a TV, and if you can see, I still haven't finished the ceiling, but you know, that's coming soon. But you know, I can stream television, internet. There's some free apps out there like Tubi, Roku channel. So, you know, I don't have a cable bill except for the Starlink service. So anyway, I hope I was able to answer some of your, you know, or shine some light on what it is like to live off grid, and which works for me. There are many other ways you can do it. My way is not the only way. It depends on you, depends on your situation. But let me tell you, it's a great lifestyle. I feel more comfortable, as far as more relaxed, I should say, and just kind of keeping busy with projects and stuff like that. So if you got any questions, man, please subscribe. So if you've got any questions, go ahead, pop them in the box below. I appreciate any kind of feedback. Also, you know, if this is your first time watching the channel, go ahead and subscribe, like, and comment, and that helps out the channel a lot. I do have another channel with my camping adventures called SEMPER Gumbie channel. Also, I have a music channel where I write my own music called Gumbie Music, and I just released 7 new songs on there, and you know, I've been keeping busy. So I appreciate you guys watching. So until the next video, this has been at the Off Grid Gumbie Homestead, out.